Hey, hello, and welcome back to a Screenwriter's Journey. Yesterday, well, not yesterday, but on day 91, I went through almost the whole script and I explained I was getting it ready for my sons to read because they have already been precast as the twins, because they are twins. I think I may have mentioned that. Anyways, so I had thought I made it all the way through the script before I showed it to him just to, get little kinks out and stuff like that. So the reality of what happened, because what we're about to look at is the result of that read and any changes that they suggested. And I'm not saying that everything they suggested I attended to, but there was one fairly major thing, although it's not anything to do with the story per se. It's just names. They had a couple little things that I'm going to attend to today. But overall, I don't know about pleasantly surprised, but I was gratified. I was encouraged, maybe is the right word, that they really enjoyed it. They, as I think I mentioned yesterday, they read it out loud. One would read for about 10 minutes, then the other, and they went back and forth and back and forth. Read through it pretty fast. I think we got through it in just about an hour and a half, more or less, maybe a little bit more. And so after they read it, I gave them like 5 minutes and we talked about something else. And then I said, well, what did you think? And then we talked about it for 20 or 30 minutes. Overall, enjoyed it, thought it was worthwhile continuing to pursue, which is good. They're honest critics. I've written other stuff that they've said, wow, this isn't working, this needs a lot of work, or yeah, this is really cool, et cetera, et cetera. So, and being actors, they obviously have a different take on it to some extent, and they thought that the characters were, coming along to being well drawn, et cetera, et cetera. Thought that it was kind of, because, actors, they like to see themselves in movies and TV, but they also like to make money, but they also like to be challenged and work and develop characters because, that's what their craft is. It's like if you hire someone to a carpenter or some skilled laborer, they just don't want to come in and put in a 4x4 fence post and then leave. They want to do something that challenges them. And in the same way that when you write, obviously you should always try to do something that challenges you instead of just something to knock something off and get it finished. Anyways, so the biggest change that you will see, and it happens pretty fast in the recording, so I'm just going to warn you / tell you up front. Apparently, I had asked them probably over a year ago, I don't know when, a long time ago, about twins' names. Their names, they're not like rhymey names, they're not alliteration names, but I wanted these twins in the story to have something that, not really cutesy, but apparently Gary and Larry are real living, breathing actor twins. I don't know how much they act, but I'm not going to say it's like a joke name, but when they read it, they did not love it. And so I said, well, can you come up with something that would be, again, not rhymey or not, Billy and Willie or something, but something that would make them, like Jeff and Gary, something that is just totally non-twins like. So something that was sort of twins like, but wasn't so goofy as apparently Gary and Larry is. And I don't know. Larry is not a name that's super common. But anyways, so one of them, I don't know if it was later or at that time, came up with what I think is a good idea. They start with the same letter. They have the same amount of letters. And three of the letters are the same. If I'm just thinking this through. So, anyways, you're going to see. I won't give it away here, but it's funny when you've been living with characters for a long, long time and you change their name. Sometimes that just throws you for a loop when you read it over again and you're saying, "Who? Oh, yeah, yeah, that guy used to be Larry," or something like that. But if these names stick, obviously, they may not unless I make the movie the way I want to make it. Who's got $5 million? So that is sort of the biggest change. And then the other ones I'll talk about as we go. So anyways, let's get into it. Day 92, and let's see what happens. And then with all that buildup, it is a rather short day. So watch this. Boom. Did I already do it? Did you see it? Did you see it? Oh, and then I'm setting up the script to be read. And this is when I realized how few people are really in this script. I mean, if you look at all of those, and some of those just have one line or, alpha voice, bravo voice. So I'm setting it up to be read. But just in case you didn't see it, Larry is now Troy and Gary is now Tony. So, as I said, both start with T, obviously. Both have 4 letters, and they share 3 of the same letters. So I thought that was kind of clever. Troy feels like Larry immediately. I realized that. And Tony easily feels like Gary, sort of a harder edge name a little bit. So that is the big change. Then the other thing they mentioned was the in the woods when Holly is getting shot at, and when she first shoots at the pickup truck, they felt like she wouldn't miss that easily because after she shoots at the tire, which is one thing, but then she shoots at Clyde twice and then misses. And so what I had in my mind when I originally wrote it is that there's a lot of trees and she has a very, very limited line of sight, so she can't just move the gun 2 or 3 inches because then she'll be shooting at a tree. So she's just got a little window she's shooting at. And as he moves, that window comes and goes. So I rewrote that to reflect, or I'm in the process of rewriting that, hopefully to address that and make it clear that it's just not like she's missing willy-nilly, that it is a very tight shot. And then I may have done that something in the woods when she is in there, just to make it clear that a very dense forest, you don't just poke your head out from behind the tree and then you've got a clear shot. So that helps too when she's talking to Paul. It's, she's in danger, but it's not like it's imminent danger where there's 10 people closing in on her. I picture Clyde being, I'm just looking around, at least 100 feet away, probably more than that. Maybe 150 feet away. Again, he's hiding behind a tree. Maybe he's poking his head out. But the time that she's talking to Paul, she is not so worried because if he was crunching through the woods, obviously she would hear him. And if she's hiding and doesn't hear any noise, then that means that he is not stalking her, most likely. So I think that was the major thing in terms of making that more apparent. And it was a very quick day. Not much happened. But what did happen was big. So what do you think? Leave a comment. I need some more subscribers. And I'm confident one day I'll get them, but I won't beg. I will not resort to begging. But if you care, I don't know that anyone's commented on anything yet, and maybe no one ever will. And maybe that's for the best. But Larry becomes Troy. Gary becomes Tony. I think it's for the better, or I wouldn't have changed it. And I don't think they will be confused. Like when you read it sometimes, if you have 2 people that are named almost the same. Sometimes it can get confusing, but mostly because, as I think I've mentioned, they are only together for the first roughly 26 pages, for the first act. And then the last part of Act 3, they actually share screen time, and the rest of the time they're apart. So the audience will know, oh, if we're with Lexi, then we're with Troy, and if we're with Abby and Holly and so forth, then we're with Tony. So I don't think that'll be an issue. The other thing, I mean, they mentioned several other little things, but one of the things when they started reading the Hogan dialogue, they at first I didn't know what they were doing, and it was just one of them and then the other, but they both did it. They talk like Hulk Hogan, and they were like, and at first I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you talking like that? And they said Hogan, Hulk Hogan. And I never even thought about that when I came up with his name. And again, H for Hogan, H for Holly. And so I said, should I change it? And they said, no, it's a good name. We were just having some fun with you. So that's what I did. I set it up for reading. I'm not sure what day 92 is going to involve. I can tell you that just about done with it for now. I'm going to send it off. Well, present day, I have sent it off to a son. Actually, that could make for an interesting bit, because he's going to call me and give me some thoughts on it. So maybe I'll record that conversation, include this, and include it in something. And then I'm going to, I won't go into it because who knows what I'll do. This is only day 92. There's at least a few days left. Potentially, there could be another 100. Let's hope not. Thanks for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this to some extent, unless you've been forced to do this by some professor or writing instructor, in which case he or she knows what's best. So suck it up. See you next time.